Hello everybody, welcome to the audiobook of Black Beauty. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you the pictures from chapter 5. I pressed the wrong button. So here's the first picture, and the second. Chapter 6, Merrylegs. One day, Mr. Bloomfield, the town clergyman, came to the house with his large family of boys and girls. Whenever they visited, there was plenty of work for Merrylegs, because the children loved to ride him. On this day, James brought Merrylegs back into the stable after a long time out in the field. "There now," he said, as he put on Merrylegs' halter. You better behave, or we shall get into trouble." "What did you do, Merrylegs?" I asked. "I have been giving those children a lesson," he said. They did not know when they had enough of me, or when I had enough of them, so I just threw them off my back." "You threw the children off?" I said, a little shocked. Actually, it was one of the boys. After more than 2 hours of the other children riding me, he decided he wanted his turn. He cut a whip out of a hazel stick and hit me with it. I tried to warn him by stopping very suddenly 2 or 3 times, but he kept hitting me. So I just rose up and let him slip off. "If I had been you," said Ginger, "I would not have given him a good kick. I would have given him a good kick." "No, I wouldn't do that," Merrylegs replied. "I wouldn't want to make James ashamed of me. Besides, my master trusts me, and if I took to kicking, where would I be? I would be sold off to a place where no one cared for me. I don't want that. I love our people. They have always been kind to me." Chapter 7, A Talk in the Garden. Ginger and I were both more race horses than large carriage horses. We were just as good at riding as for driving. Our greatest pleasure when we were saddled for a riding party, the master rode on Ginger, and the mistress on me, and the young ladies on Sir Oliver and Merrylegs. I had often wondered why Sir Oliver had such a short tail. On one of our holidays, when we were let loose in the orchard, I asked him about it. "It was a cruel act," he exclaimed. "I was very young, and I was taken to a place and tied up so that I couldn't move. Then they came and cut my tail. They cut right through the flesh." "How awful!" I said. It was awful. It was not only painful, but outrageous. My dignity was greatly injured when they took my tail away. Besides, I needed my tail. I can't tell you how aggravating it is to have flies land on you. When you're not able to brush them off, thank heaven people no longer cut tails off." "Why did they do that? Why did they do it at that time?" asked Ginger. "For fashion," exclaimed Sir Oliver. "Someone decided horses need short tails to look good. Look what they do to dogs. They cut off their tails and pin back their ears to make them look cute." "Ah, they are all so mean," Ginger said excitedly. "Well," I said, "can anyone tell me the use of blinkers?" "They are supposed to keep horses from getting frightened," replied Justice. "I think blinkers are dangerous things, especially at night," said Sir Oliver. "Many accidents might never happened. Many accidents might never have happened if horses had full use of their eyes. Horses, after all, can see much better than people." "I'll tell you a secret," said Merrylegs. "I believe John does not approve of blinkers." I heard him tell the master that he thought it would be a good thing if the colts were broken without blinkers. So let's cheer up and run to the other end of the orchard. The wind has blown down some apples. Then we made ourselves feel better by munching on some very sweet apples that lay scattered on the grass. Chapter 8. A Stormy Day. Late in autumn one day, my master had to go on a long business journey, and John was to go with him. I was hitched to a cart, and we all set out. It had rained a great deal, and after a while the wind picked up. As we came to a low wooden toll bridge, we could see that the river was high. The man at the gate said the river was rising fast. We got over, but in some places the water was halfway up to my knees. Once in town, we stayed a long time and didn't set out for home until late in the afternoon. Back on the road, the wind was blowing hard, and the great branches of the trees were swaying about like twigs. Suddenly there was a groan and a crack. A great oak, torn up by its roots, came crashing down in our path. "That was a close call," said my master. "What shall we do now?" "Well, we can't drive over it or get around it," answered John. "We must go back to the crossway, about 6 miles back. It will make us late, but Black Beauty is still strong." We turned around and headed back. By the time we got to the toll bridge, the water was over the middle of it. John did not call me to a stop. But the moment my foot touched the bridge, I knew something was wrong. I didn't dare to go forward. John tapped me lightly with the whip, but I refused to go. "There's something wrong, sir," said John, as he got down from the cart. He came forward to lead me, but I still wouldn't go. Just then the man from the toll gate ran out of the house from the other side of the river and cried for us to halt. "What's the matter?" shouted John. "The bridge is broken in the middle," he yelled. "Thank God for Black Beauty," exclaimed my master. John turned me around. The sun had set, and it was growing darker and darker. As we went along, my master and John talked about how animals had often saved people's lives. At last we came to the park gate safely. As we pulled up to the house, the mistress came out. She was very glad to see us, for she had been worried that we had an accident. My master assured her that we were all right. "We got here safely," he said, "but only because of our dear Black Beauty." Chapter 9. James Howard. One morning early in December, John was leading me into my box after my exercise, and James came down from the corn chamber when the master walked in. "Good morning, John," said my master. "I want to know if you have any complaints about James here." "No, sir," answered John. He is the smartest, most pleasant and honest young fellow I've had in this stable. I trust his work." James, said my master, "I am very glad to find that John has a high opinion of you. I have a letter from my brother-in-law. He needs a trustworthy fellow to become his coachman. I want to recommend you for the job. It would be a big step, so think it over and talk to your family. Let me know what you decide." "Thank you, sir," said James very excitedly. Soon it was decided that James would take the job. In the meantime, while he was still at Birtwick Park, he got plenty of practice driving. Ginger and I were hitched to the wagon, and James held the reins. On one trip, we traveled about 46 miles away, so that the master and mistress could visit some friends. The first day, James drove the carriage for 32 miles. He drove very carefully, keeping our feet on the smoothest part of the road. He put the brake on one going downhill and took it off going up. When we arrived in town where we were to spend the night, James led Ginger and me to a stable. Two men who worked there rubbed us down, and James left to get some rest. Much later, I heard a horse being led in. As he was rubbed down for the night, a man sat by smoking a pipe and talking to the groom. After a while, the groom asked the young man to put out his pipe and throw some hay into the horse's rack, which the man did. Then the door was locked, and we left for the night. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke feeling uneasy. The air was thick, and I could hardly breathe. I could see very little, but I could tell the other horses were restless. I trembled all over with fear. At last I heard someone in the stable. It was the groom. He was untying the horses and trying to lead them out. He seemed very frightened, causing us to be even more frightened. We all refused to go with him. He finally gave up and left the stable. There was a rushing sound overhead in the loft, and as it grew louder, I could see red light flickering on the wall. Suddenly I heard James's quiet and comforting voice. "Come, my beauties," he said. "It is time to wake up and leave this place." I was near the door, so he came to me first. He put his scarf over my eyes and talked to me gently, leading me out into the yard. There, he took the scarf from my eyes and left me with another man, then headed back into the burning stable. I whinnied when I saw him go. The smoke was now pouring out the stable door, but I kept watching it for James to come out. There was much confusion. People were shouting from every direction. Then I heard my master's voice. "James Howard! James Howard!" he shouted. "James Howard!" Finally, from the door of the stable, James appeared leading a horse. It was Ginger. She was coughing violently, and James was unable to speak. "When you have caught your breath, lad," said my master, "we will get out of here as quickly as we can." Soon we were hurrying to the marketplace. My master found another hotel and went off to get the mistress. James put us to bed in another stable. We were glad to be safe, but we felt sad about those poor horses left in the burning stable. Chapter 10. James takes his leave. The next day we set out on our journey. The distance was shorter, so the traveling was a little easier. Just after sunset, we reached the house of my master's friend, and we were taken to a cozy stable. There was a kind coachman there who, after hearing about the fire, had many kind things to say about James. "Young man, it is clear that your horses know whom they can trust," he said. "It is the hardest thing in the world to get horses out of a stable when there is a fire or a flood." "I salute you, young man. We stayed at this place for only a few days. Then we returned to Birtwick Park. The journey home went well, and we were glad to be back in our stable." John was just as glad to see us. He and James talked a while. James asked who would be replacing him. "Little Joe Green at the lodge," replied John. "Why, he's a child!" exclaimed James. "He is 14 and a half," said John. "He is small, but quick and willing, and kind-hearted too. I know the master would like to give him a chance." The next day we met Joe Green. He came to the stables to learn as much as he could before James left. He could sweep the stables and bring in the hay, but he was too short to groom Ginger and me. James had to show Joe how to groom our Merrylegs, who complained about being cared for by a child who knew nothing. By the next week, though, Merrylegs confessed that Joe was learning well. Finally, the day came for James to leave. He looked very unhappy. He said he would miss his friends and family, as well as the horses he loved so much. But John cheered him up by reminding him that he would meet new friends and would make his family proud of him. After James left, Merrylegs moped about for weeks. John had to take him out and let him gallop in the fields every morning. We were all sad to see James go. He had treated us all with a special kindness. Now, before I end the video, I will show you the pictures from chapter 10, and I'll remember to look at the button before I end. There are only 2 pictures. Bye everybody, see you maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. We'll read from chapter 11 to chapter 15. Bye y'all.